Salve, y'all. It's Magister Hodges. This is a quick review, or not really a review, it's a quick lesson about some of the new cases that we're going to see, or some of the new uses we're going to see for nouns in the ablative case. And you're going to answer some questions over the course of this video if you're viewing it through Edpuzzle. Just do your best. You'll get all the answers. And yeah, I'm going to cut to it. Let's go. So, ablative nouns, we've seen them for a while. We already know them as the objects. No real good place for me here. I'm going to float down here for a minute. We already know them as objects of sid-space prepositions. The sid-space prepositions are those 8 common prepositions for which their object is ablative. They are in converse with non-sid-space prepositions, which are all the other prepositions besides those original 8 that are followed by a noun in the accusative case. So we've known ablative case nouns for a while, and we'll see them after these prepositions right here. These are the sid-space prepositions on the right: sine, in, de, sub, pro, ab, cum, and ex. Here's what they mean. And here is them being used in a prepositional phrase with translations. So, sine amicis, without friends. You'll notice that amicis has the ablative plural ending here. It's ablative because it is the object of the sid-space preposition sine. In mensa, on the table, that long A is ablative. De bello, that O is ablative, about the war. Sub cane, under the dog, that E is the ablative of the third declension. So on and so forth. You can see the other examples here. And how they work. So that's what we already know. All other prepositions, like trans for cross, they will be followed by an accusative because they're not one of these 8. This is what we already know. So what else is there to learn? Well, the ablative nouns in the ablative case are actually some of the most useful. It's one of the most useful cases, probably the next most useful after the nominative and accusative. You're going to start to see passages where nouns in the ablative case are just kind of floating there on their own. We're going to call them free-range ablatives. They're just hanging out there doing their own thing. Well, then how do you know how to translate them? What makes them different from a nominative or an accusative, so on and so forth? Well, they can assume a lot of different uses. They were originally called the instrumental case, ablative case was, because it was used often to show like the instrument or way with which you did something. It can be really descriptive. So similar to how we've talked about with dative nouns, if a noun is dative, in the dative case, you're going to translate it as to blank or for blank. So like if I say, I give a gift to the girl, I will say ego donum puellae do. That puellae is dative, and so it's going to mean to the girl. Ablative case nouns, if they're floating on their own, have a few more possibilities. You can translate them as from blank, with blank, in blank, or by blank. And context will generally tell you which one's right. One way to remember those 4 words that you could typically see before a free-range ablative is fwib. Fwib blank, from, with, in, or by. They serve a bunch of different functions. And these functions can have names. And these names can be kind of confusing. To me, it's not really important that you remember all the terminology and all the names. The only thing that's really important to me is that when you see a noun floating there in the ablative case, that you understand that it can have a wide range of possible answers, and that you may have to really understand the rest of the sentence before you know how it's being used. Some are more common than others, and we're going to talk about that. But yeah, so this can be a little complex. It requires a lot of practice, which you will be doing today. So let's look at some of these different answers here, or some of these different functions. I'm going to float down here at first. So here's some of the examples of the different types of ablatives you can see. They look the same no matter what case or no matter what their use is. It's always just going to be ablative. So it's going to have one particular ending, and it can be used in a bunch of different ways. So let's start first by probably the most common way. The ablative of means, or the instrumental ablative, is used when you want to tell the instrument that was used to complete an action. They can be typically translated as with blank. You will not see a preposition in front of it, and it's going to tell you what you use to accomplish an action. It's the instrument. So let's look at this example. Bob amicum gladio petit. Bob attacks petit, amicum, his friend, gladio, with a sword. So gladio here is in the ablative case. It's in the ablative case because it's showing you what he used to attack his friend. Now that, we think two people being together, right? I'm with this person. I'm with that person. That's a fundamentally different meaning than saying I attacked him with a sword. So how do we differentiate in Latin? Well, we have the ablative of accompaniment, which is the one that we've seen most often. You use the ablative of accompaniment when you're trying to show who or what is accompanying another noun, and it's translated as with blank. And you will see the word cum, meaning with, in front of it. If you see the word cum, that means like two things are together. They are with each other. If you do not see a preposition in front of it, that means that's what you're doing. That's what you're using to accomplish the goal. So if I say Melissa cum amicis ambulat, that's saying Melissa walks with her friends. She and her friends are walking together. But if I said up here, Bob amicum amico petit, then that would be Bob attacks the friend with another friend, as in he's using that friend to beat the other friend. So that's the difference between instrument and accompaniment. Let's move up here now. All right, other things that you'll see that are pretty often is the ablative of agent. You'll see this in sentences with a passive verb to show who's doing the action. Similar to our passive voice presentation, a lot of the examples I had were pretty simple sentences. Like if we were going to say Bob attacks his friend, that's active. If we want to make that passive, we would want to say the friend is attacked by Bob. Okay, so in order to say by Bob, in our practice, we used the word ab or to mean by. And so if you see babo to make him ablative, then you can tell he's the one doing the action. Sometimes you won't even see the word ab or there'll just be a noun sitting there floating in the ablative case. And if you see a passive verb, then it's pretty likely that noun in the ablative case is the one doing the action. So let's look at the example. Vinum a mercatore venditur. The wine is being sold by the merchant. So vinum, nominative, venditur, the verb, is being sold. Who's selling it? A mercatore, by the merchant. So in this one, I included the preposition a, meaning by. But if you just saw mercatore there, vinum mercatore venditur, that could also mean the wine is being sold by the merchant. Just is what it is. All right. Probably the third most common use of the ablative is called the ablative of manner, and that's like the manner with which you accomplish a goal. It's translated as with blank. Usually, you do not typically see a preposition with it, so it can be treated very similarly to the ablative of means. And honestly, if you don't know the difference and you just translate them both with, it's going to make it's going to make just as much sense. So. Whereas up here I said, Bob amicum gladio petit, Bob attacks his friend with a sword. He's using the sword to do it. Down here, nos fabulam gaudio spectamus, we watch the play with joy or with glee. It's being used the same, pretty similar, but it's not really telling us that like glee is the instrument that allowed us to enjoy it or that allowed us to watch it. It's just telling us that was our state of mind at the time. And it can be used in that way. Okay, yeah. Do you need the key? No. Okay. Then lastly, that brings us to the ablative of separation. And this is what we use to show that something is being separated from something else. This is where we use the from translation, from blank. You will not see a preposition in front of it. So let's look at an example here. Milites barbaros urbe agitant. Oops, I left that R should not be there. That's a typo. It should be agitant. The soldiers chase the barbarians from the city. So the soldiers are chasing the barbarians, and then we see urbe there, and that's telling us that that's what they're being chased from. That's the ablative of separation. That's the from, and from, in, with, or by. And that's why it's more important to me that you remember fwib, from, with, in, or by. That'll be a lot more useful to you than trying to cram all these different titles of different types of ablatives into your head in different specific meanings. Like I said, if we just saw milites barbaros urbe agitant, the soldiers chase the barbarians, and then I see urbe, I could go through the list of translations and then probably arrive at the one that makes the most sense if I understand the rest of the sentence. Like if I came up and had no idea what this was, I know milites is soldiers. I know agitant is chase. I know barbaros is barbarians, and that on its own, this is the soldiers chase the barbarians. Then I see urbe. I'm like, okay, that's some form of city. It's ablative. It's hanging out on its own. Fwib urbe. So from the city. So, or I'm sorry, if I use the other possible translations first, the soldiers chase the barbarians with a city. Doesn't really make sense. The soldiers chase the barbarians in the city. Okay, yeah, that could work. The soldiers chase the barbarians by the city. That doesn't really work because we know that by on its own is meaning like by someone, not like standing next to it. Oops, gotta get this out of the way. Then in that case, you see from the city, you're like, okay, maybe that makes more sense. They're doing chasing. Why would they chase? I mean, they could chase them in the city, but we probably see a different word there. So sometimes, and you may see that and say in the city, and you know what? I would tell you I totally see why you're getting that. But if you keep in mind that little separation thing, that it could be used to show like things are running away from each other. We can tell from the context of this sentence, since the soldiers are chasing the barbarians, they're probably trying to get them out of there, right? That would be a good guess. Once again, in could be another one that would make sense, and I would accept it. But I'd probably point out that actually this is an ablative of separation. And as you practice, your brain kind of starts to figure it out. So these are the 5 major types. There are tons of them. Some of them are really obscure. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. That's why it's just important to remember FWIB. Okay, so let's talk about the ablative. This is just a general review. These are just first, second, third, fourth, and fifth declension nouns. Got an example here. In this top row, you'll see the nominative and genitive forms, nominative and genitive singular, nominative and genitive plural. And then below, you'll see in the bold, the ablative singular and ablative plural for the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth conjugations. I just put this here so as a reference because you may have to recognize these. I know in the practice you're about to do, you're going to need to know how to do it. So I would highly encourage keeping this up. Maybe make a copy of this, chart. So let's get to the practice. All right, so you're about to see a series of questions. Basically, you're given a sentence and you're given a word. You need to make this word ablative and then fit it into the sentence and then tell me what that sentence is going to mean. So here's an example right here. There's actually an example up here. Graiki servanter. The Greeks are being saved. Dukes. Okay, well, since they're being saved and it's passive, it's probably going to be an ablative of agent. So we're going to put Graiki ad duke servanter. It's an ablative of agent because it's telling us who's doing it. The Greeks are being saved by the general, ad duke. So I'm going to show you one more example of it being right. We're going to do the first one right here. Praemium meum expecto. Okay, so to make this ablative, I'll change gaudium to gaudio, and that will make it an ablative of manner if you know the rest of the sentence. And the rest of the sentence will be, I wait for my prize, gaudio. Oops. Gaudio with joy. Okay, that's an ablative of manner. So you're about to see these, and I will post the answer right afterwards. Okay, I'm going to try and go quickly because I'm running out of time here. Multos miseros senes oculis meis videre possum. It's an ablative of means. I am able to see many miserable old men, oculis meis, with my eyes. That's what I'm using to see the miserable old men. Nautae fabulam lacrimis multis narrant. It's an ablative of manner. The sailors tell the story lacrimis multis. That's our ablative, with many tears in their eyes. Okay. Number 4, persas expectare possumus fortitudo. Fortitudine expectare possumus. It's an ablative of manner. We possumus expectare, to wait for. The Persians with fortitude. It's the manner in which we're doing it. Okay. Number 5, animus magnus non vincitor. And then we got to put in the word tenebrae. Tenebris is the ablative plural. So you'll notice tenebrae is plural. That's why we made this plural. That's where I'm getting that from. Okay. That is an ablative of agent because we got a passive verb here. So that's going to make it an ablative of agent. The great spirit is not conquered. Tenebris, by the shadows. All right, number 6. Justi homines vinculis liberare debent. That's an ablative of separation. The just men should be liberated from their chains. And then here's ad astra ambulamus real quick.